Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Working in America conversation series. Today, we're going to be talking about Has the First Job Disappeared? Connecting young workers to employers and career-building work experiences. My name is Maureen Conway. I'm Vice President for Policy Programs here at the Aspen Institute and Executive Director of our Economic Opportunities Program. In the Working in America series, we talk about a lot of different things around how the world of work is changing and the issues related to work and connecting to work. And we're really excited about the conversation today. It's focusing on one of the issues we're thinking about how do you get that first job? How do you start a career? And how do you start a career and learn on the job? So often when we think about what do young people need to connect to jobs, we think about education and training, right? And that's important. But obviously, education and training institutions can't do everything by themselves. And the role of the employer is really important, and thinking about how people understand what they're learning on the job and really make that first job a good job that is the start and the foundation to a great career. So that's kind of the conversation that we're going to be having today. I also wanted to note that one of the things we'll talk a little bit about today is apprenticeship, and it's National Apprenticeship Week. So happy National Apprenticeship Week to everybody. And importantly, of course, I also want to thank our funders for this event. We couldn't do it without them. We are very grateful to the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation, the Walmart Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the F.B. Heron Foundation, the Prudential Foundation for their support of this series. We're very grateful to them. A couple of logistical items. Please do silence your phone if you have one, but please do tweet. Our hashtag is TalkGoodJobs. In today's conversation, I'm gonna get to this very quickly because we have a full conversation and it is in 3 parts. So in the first part, we're going to have our moderator for the day, Melanie Trotman. Thank you so much, Melanie, for being here, interviewing LaShawn Amato. So thank you, LaShawn, as well, for being here. So we're going to start with the interview because we really wanted to get a sense of, have a little bit of a conversation about what is going on for young people in connecting to jobs today. The second part, we have a nice panel of folks to bring some diverse perspective to this. So Melanie will be in conversation with an employer, an economist, somebody who leads a program connecting young people to work, and a policy expert. And she will match people to names when we get to that part. If you want a quick peek at who they all are, you have the materials on your seats, and they came with the materials around the event, so you can take a look at that. And then our third part will be audience question and answer, so be prepared for that. And also, if you're in the live stream audience, you'll have instructions about how you can tweet or text us questions when we get to that section. So that's our agenda for today, and it's pretty full. So with that, I just want to, again, thank Melanie Trotman of the Wall Street Journal for being here to moderate this conversation, and turn it over to Melanie. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm really glad to be here. Thanks for having me. I think it's an important topic that we're going to talk about with Ford here today. And I just want to start with giving you some statistics. From April to July this year, and that's a time when youth employment increases, the number of 16 to 24-year-olds working rose by 1.9 million to about 20.5 million people. That's according to the Labor Department. This year, more than half of young people were employed in July, about 53%. And that's about the same as a year earlier. Now, the Labor Department says that the summer labor force participation rate of youth has been fairly steady since July of 2010, and that's after being on the decline for the prior 2 decades. So that's good news. But does the youth employment rate need to be even higher? Are there steps that employers and others can take to help increase it during summer or throughout the year? Can more be done to increase the even lower employment rates of minority youth? And is there a need to create more quality jobs for youth to prepare them for the future? These are some of the questions that we'll aim to answer today in our discussions. And we'll start by sharing the journey of one adult who works with youth and who had to navigate some obstacles of his own in the job market when he was younger. So I give you LaShawn Amato. Now, I've already had the pleasure of speaking with LaShawn to prepare for our talk. So I'll give a brief introduction so that he and I can dive straight into the issues. LaShawn is 27 years old. He lives in the Boston area. He works for a grassroots organization called Opportunity Youth United. And it's a group that's trying to generate increased funding to provide Opportunity Youth a reconnection, a pathway to reconnection, such as getting education and finding work. The group, which is a sister organization of Youth Build USA, offers what LaShawn calls second chance programs for youth. Some of the services include career counseling to young people and leadership development. LaShawn is originally from the Boston area. He grew up in Brockton. He went to Boston area public schools. And he shared that he had limited resources in the youth. He had some rocky times. He had some run-ins with the law as a teen that put him on probation and left him with a record. And that led to a rough start in the employment market as a young adult. But the good news is that he was able to get on track. He was able to turn it around with the help of some people and programs that really inspired him. And what I want to do now is walk him and walk you through key parts of his journey so that you can hopefully learn something instructive from it. So LaShawn, what was your environment like growing up? How did it shape your goals? One thing you told me was that people would tell you to go to college, but no one explained what that entailed or what that looked like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I heard you mention that I had a bad start in employment, but I would argue that I had a bad start in life. And that's why we like to empower our young people and let them know that they're born into poverty and it's not their fault, right? Because my foundation was shooken before I was even born. When I was born, my father was locked up. So my earliest memories of my father was talking through a phone in a jail cell. And I left my mother to raise me on her own. And I grew up in the city of Boston, which, if I were to describe my community, I would just say, just think of everything you wouldn't want your kids growing up in. Substance abuse, violence, dropout factories, the list goes on. And it was hard to identify those role models. It was hard to identify those leaders. My mother and a few of my family members would say, you should go to college and make a lot of money. But having a motive to make a lot of money is not what it takes to get people to want to go and persist through college. There was no one that really showed me this is what it looks like. My family survived, and I seen that, and I seen them settle for these blue-collar jobs. Most of my family members were in the union, or they worked for the transit system in the city. And we're in a low-income community like Boston. Those are sort of the golden jobs, right? I'm in the union, or I work for the MBTA. And it's funny because I entered the lottery for the MBTA, and I actually got accepted. I passed the test, I went through a series of rounds of tests and evaluations, and then at the end, they denied me because of my criminal record. And despite the fact that I got letters of recommendations from my probation officer, executive directors of local and national nonprofits, and have so many people vouching for me, they still turned me down. And that ended up being a blessing in disguise, which I'll explain later.
You said that you told me previously that you felt like your school failed you. Tell us how.
I would say primarily in middle school, in the Boston public school system, I went to a school called the Lewis. And I could tell you that I remember being at my 8th grade graduation and feeling like I didn't deserve to be there. And I say that because I've always been a man of integrity, and I didn't feel like I earned it. I didn't feel like I learned enough, and I didn't feel prepared to go into high school. In that school, I did everything but learn. I mean, I was running up and down the hallways. There were 4 people who were sharing books. I couldn't take books home. A few of my classmates actually they died, they were killed close to the school. So on top of not feeling safe, on top of not feeling challenged, I disengaged and I became apathetic, and that attitude carried over into high school.
Right. You said that you were disengaged for a couple of years there. When you didn't work, you started getting into trouble with the law. What got you on track after that?
to be honest, so I was working, doing what I had to do to survive, right? And then I realized that I had to find a way to legitimize myself, right? Because I would try to find even a basic job. And now I had little small jobs when I was a teenager, a peer mentor, and sort of these youth development summer program jobs. But when I tried to get into the actual work job market, Walmart, CVS, whatever it may be, I was embarrassed that when it would come to education, I would have to leave it blank. So that motivated me to, all right, guy, you could, but at least get your GED. Just like that embarrassment sort of nudged me to want to go at least get my GED, and I ended up getting more.
I think that's a really important point, that embarrassment, because I think it's something, that shame that can discourage people from applying for jobs and trying harder. But you didn't give up. You kept moving. You said it took about 3 months to get your GED. And one thing you told me is that the people at Youth Build, you said, I trusted them. And I thought that was powerful because it seemed to me to be the foundation of what allows you to thrive. And so just explain to us, please, why did you trust them? What is it that they did for you?
I would say, I always start with this story because it's a memorable experience for me. The very first day that I walked into the program. So I learned about the program from a cousin of mine when I was in middle school cutting up. I remember her, who was a female at the time, she would come home with this hard hat and all these tools, and she would just be so happy to go to school, and I would just look at her like, what is wrong with you? You know what I mean? Like, I at the time, I couldn't stand going to school, and I just seen the joy that she had. But then I ended up going to her graduation. I remember it was in Faneuil Hall in Boston, and I seen that she wasn't the only one that had that joy. The entire class had that joy. They were crying, there was tears. I mean, it was just, you could feel the love in the air. So that memory stuck with me when I got to a point where I wanted to find a program, right? And as a disconnected youth, when you're disconnected for so long and you're new to a community, I was new to Brockton at the time, you don't know where to begin. So there's a lot of programs in the city, you don't know where they are. They have all these demands of you, fill out this paper. It can become an overwhelming process, especially when you have your mom who was, in charge of handling your doctor's appointments and things like that. So on top of trying to grow up and be my own man, just being confronted with how do I find the right service? So in the midst of my search, I just remember that experience of my cousin, and I knew that there was a youth field in Brockton, so I said, let me give him a shot. So I went in the very first day just to take it was like a sort of like an information, take the tape test, the formal process. When I walked in, the program manager there, his name was Jay Casilli, big guy, he had a big belly, I'll tell him to his face. So, after I took the test, he came up to me, he was like, LaShawn Amato, and then he came and gave me this big hug, right? And because he had such a big belly, we were hugging like that. And I was a little blown away because I was like, what is wrong with this guy? But that set the tone from the beginning. Usually how things begin is how they end. And I found that love carried out throughout the entire program. And then it just comes from our program manager because it means a lot when it comes from the leadership, right? Because, everything is a reflection of their leadership. I got that from all of the staff. All the staff served as a mentor for me and for everyone into that program. Of course, we all had closer relationships with other individuals, but there was an expectation in that program that we are a family and we are all gonna support and love each other. And when you have that trust and support, which means a lot to young people who come from the streets, when you come from the streets, respect and trust are the two most critical things. And once you have that, I was able to be vulnerable and let them guide me in life, right? Because they exposed me to a lot, right? But I allowed them to sort of pull and tug on me because I had that trust.
And you had mentioned to me that they set high goals for you. They pushed you. You said, and you did really well. They also helped you put a resume together. They helped you fill out applications. So those are some really core things that they also taught you to do, in addition to just the support, the emotional support that they provided for you. All very important things. It sounds like they believed in you and that it empowered you. That's what you have described to me. So after the GED, you took a college summer class, and you enrolled full-time in the fall in community college, and you got a job at Price Right.
Yes.
Supermarket. You said Youth Build didn't find that job for you, but they helped you put the resume together and fill out applications. Tell us what went well at that supermarket job.
What went well at that supermarket job? Let's talk about how I almost didn't get into it. When you talk about employment and the barriers. So again, on my 18th birthday, October 1st, whatever year that was, I know it was October 1st because that's my birthday. I was expected to be in court. I had, at the time, a 2-year suspended sentence, and I had violated because I was driving without a license. Because when you get a drug offense in Massachusetts, they automatically take your license away, regardless of the offense. So talk about barriers. If you can't get to school or work, that's a barrier. So I had a car, and I had my license taken away from me. So every morning, before I would walk to school, especially on, I live in Boston, and days when it's snowing, I look in that driveway like, am I walking or am I gonna get in that nice car that I just bought and owned? So of course I drove the car and I got caught, and that led me in front of the judge on my birthday. And I remember pleading with my court-appointed lawyer, listen, I'm starting a job. I just finished this program. I'm about to go into college. And he stopped me before I could finish my sentence, and he said, none of that matters right now. And I went downstairs, talked to my probation officer, who ended up being my strongest advocate. And we went to the courtroom hearing, and because he dismissed the progress that I made, they were literally they had one cuff linked, and then as they were approaching to lock the other one, my probation officer came storming out of the side door, whispered some things into the judge's ear, she became my advocate. And next thing you know, they let me free. I was off to go. I was able to go to my first day on the job, and I was able to go start my journey at Massasoit. So before I even got there, I still had to overcome that significant hurdle. And again, all because I was trying to get to school.
When you did get there, what were a few things that were good about the job that you learned from the job?
I mean, I really got to practice the discipline that I got from youth field, right? Knowing what it's like to get up on time, to maybe do work that you're not so happy to do, right? So I got to practice that. And because I was so hungry to get a job, and when I finally got it, I mean, I was their best employee. I was there I was early, I was putting up the stock, and I was such a good worker that I was only there for 2 months, and they asked me to be a supervisor.
Right, and so you ran into some trouble at that point because they wanted to promote you, and they ran a background check, which they hadn't done before, I think. And they found out that you had lied on your application, and that you had denied having a criminal past. And, why did you lie?
I had to, because I was desperate. And when I say I was looking for a job, I was looking. I mean, I had a list of over 30. I would mark every time I fill out applications. And mind you, a lot of these retail applications take a long time. These assessments that take 40 minutes. I put a lot of effort into getting a job, and I wasn't getting anything. And I knew why. Because they say, be honest, right? And sometimes that doesn't necessarily work. So that one time where I decided to lie, I got in. So they let me in. I don't remember lying on the application. So when they asked me to become a supervisor, they had to do another level of background check. And I was up front at that time.
Right.
And I told them, and when the results came back, they had found a discrepancy. And the day that I came in, I was excited, thinking I was about to get the great news, and it turned into the worst day of my life at the time, because I was really excited about getting that position. They said, LaShawn, we found out that you lied on your application, so not only are we not going to promote you, we have to terminate you. So I went from climbing to unemployed like that.
So one of the things that gets at is, the Obama administration's push to get employers to be more open-minded about applicants who have criminal records, and considering more closely what the offense was, and whether it's even relevant to the job that person is doing. But LaShawn, you did get a second chance. You got a second chance of your own, and just tell us how. I think it involved Boston Market.
Yeah.
Okay.
So after the price right experience, the supermarket experience, I knew moving forward, no matter how desperate I was, that I couldn't lie because it didn't last. So I had an interview for Boston Market, and I was nervous going into the interview again because I was like, did I lie on this application? Because, when you fill out so many, you don't know, like, when they received it or what's going on. So I went into the interview. Whoever was calling me, I was there. And what was unique about this interview was she lowered the bar at the very beginning. That was the very first thing that she pointed out. She said, Sean, I see this on your application. I see that, but this is just paper. I see potential in you. I see you going to school. I see you going to work. And she just wanted assurance from me that I would stay on that path, and that she made it explicit that she wasn't going to hold me against that. And while she was not the best supervisor, I had nothing but respect for her because she did that for me. And she was tough, but she set the high expectations. And again, she was that foot in the door. So I could really respect her for that.
Right. And so you attended community college for 2 years, you graduated, you transferred to a state university, UMass Boston. You got a bachelor's degree in criminal justice.
Correct.
And you were working at Boston Market most of that time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, today's discussion is focused in part on the role that employers can play in providing more and better employment opportunities and career building opportunities for young people. What actions would you like to see employers take to accomplish this goal?
I would like to see employers change the culture of their corporations or their organizations, whatever you want to call it, because that goes into the policies that they have. Like I said, I couldn't get in because I had this criminal record, right? And there's a few others. There's issues of profiling, those type of barriers. But also, it's about access and opening doors, right? Because Opportunity Youth United, one of our biggest recommendations is to increase the number of private internships, right? And expose these young people to these work environments. Because like I said, they're growing up, all they see is drug dealers, aspiring athletes, and people who work for the MBTA or the union. They have a very limited lens on life. So when you can expose it to these different careers, that sets them up. They're able to get the experience that they need and build their resume so they can become good candidates down the line. But a lot of times that access is not there. And then there's barriers as far as opportunity.
Okay. And policy. What about, what are one or two policies or policy changes that you'd like to see to help young people access good jobs?
So in my experience in the youth field, I would say that one policy change I would like to see is an expansion of national service, because I think that when we talk about violence in communities, and because I studied criminal justice, I got to go there. One of the theories of why people commit crime is because they have no sense of self-connection, self-purpose. And again, being new to the Brockton community, I didn't have a connection to that community, so it was easy for me to do whatever I had to do to that community, which was damage, right? But through my service in Brockton, whether it was renovating a home for a low-income family or cleaning up the local park, you start to feel pride, you feel a connection, and then you also don't want to see nobody violating the work that you've just done. You have a sense of ownership. And again, it becomes that much harder to proceed and do more damage. But like I said, service opportunities can be a barrier for certain youth, especially those who have court involvement.
Okay. And funding, I mean, it's something you benefited from certain types of funding that helps you get through.
Yes. Another one of our recommendations is expand pathways to higher education. As you know, even middle-class families are struggling to pay off tuition. And so imagine what it's like for someone living in poverty. And I definitely wasn't paying for it on my Boston Market. I would call it a stipend. I wouldn't even call it a wage. So I was a recipient of Pell Grants. I mean, that's really what got me through. Support through the Pell Grants, support through Youth Field. Youth Field supported me through Stoneman scholarships. Even outside of the program, they continue to support me through that. They established an individual development account for me to help pay off some of my finances. I mean, I'm still into working nonprofit, so I'm trying to keep the numbers down.
Great. We're going to wrap up here. I wanted to finish with one thing that you told me when we spoke previously. You said that people who do well end up leaving. You were talking about your community, and there's no one to look up to. So I really feel like that was kind of your call to the public to mentor. If you grew up in a tough neighborhood and you get out, to come back to help, or to be involved. And so I thought that's a sort of powerful message. So
Thank you.
thank you
Thank
for
you.
this conversation. It's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to do a quick change of chairs. And while they do that, I just wanted to mention one thing I forgot to say earlier, which is we were so glad to be working with our colleagues in the Aspen Forum for Community Solutions and bringing you to today's event. And I want to thank them again for introducing us to LaShawn, who you just got to hear speak. So I want to give a big shout out to them. And now we're going to get set up for part two.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yes. Good afternoon, panelists. Thank you for being here. I'm just going to go right into it. We have here Dr. Paul Harrington. He's the director of the Center for Labor Markets and Policy at Drexel University. Next to him is Amy Barrett, the director of strategic initiatives at the Cohen Institute at Tulane University. Next to Amy, we have Keisha Bird. Keisha is the director of youth policy at CLASP. And then we've got Tammy Simmons. Tammy is vice president of marketing and culture for Machine Specialties Incorporated. So I think I'm going to start with you, Paul. You've done quite a lot of research on the topic of youth employment and labor market trends over the years. Give us an overview of the major trends that you've been seeing just over the past few decades.
Yeah, the turning point in all this was really in 2000. That was sort of the last full employment year. We had very high fractions of kids, teens, and young adults engaged in the labor force. On average, at any point in time, half the 16 and 19-year-old kids, a little bit more than that, were engaged in the job market. And this is an important thing because this is, and maybe we can talk about this a little bit later, but work is a little bit like going to school in the sense it's a human capital building process. So it's important for youngsters to get that early work experience. What's happened really since 2000 is the job market attachment of teens and young adults has fallen a lot. And as a result, the fraction of teens that have a job has come down a lot as well. In 2000, we had 45% of kids in the US had a job, and that varied a lot by states and localities within states. That fraction today is somewhere around 25, 26, 27%. So it's pretty low. It's almost a half. The employment rates of kids are about half of what they were. Part of why that's happened there's been an age twist in the pattern of labor force attachment. And we've seen very rapid increases in the employment rates of people 65 to 74 and 75 and above. And what we see going on here is I did some runs for this talk, and what we see is this tremendous penetration of some of these older workers into traditional teen jobs. So you're finding these youngsters in very, very, very sharp reductions in the number of teens in cashier jobs, retail sales, stock clerk jobs. All you had stock clerk jobs working in the grocery stores, So these kind of, if you take the top 10 teen jobs back in 2000, the number of teens employed in them has fallen by about a third. And then when you look at, okay, where have these older workers gone? The employment rates of older workers in these teen jobs have just exploded. So we're seeing, and when you go to the grocery store, when you go to the gas station, you see it. You see me packing your groceries, right? So you're really seeing this tremendous substitution of older workers for teens and even young adults. And part of this has got to do with, I think, with basic, risk-averse activity by employers. And part of what's going on there is employers, when they're screening, what you're doing is you're trying to hide all your sins, okay? And what the employer's trying to do is figure out what those sins are. And that's what that interview battle sort of is. And so employers are risk minimizers, and so they tend to hire older workers, particularly in zero-skill jobs. Okay, and a lot of the jobs I'm talking about are jobs that all of us could go out and do right now. And the reason why they do it is what they desire is a set of behavioral traits around reliability, dependability, self-control, and around ethical issues. And what's very clear is kids are at the bottom of the labor supply queue on that. And so what we're seeing is under conditions of slack labor markets, which we really have characterized the American economy in the last 16 years, that what's happened is that firms are in a position where they're able to substitute older workers, particularly 55 and above, for teens and young adults. And that's a lot of the story of teen employment in the country.
Thank you. Paul, can you just briefly mention the variances of youth employment by race?
Yeah, so if you take a look at the employment rates of kids by race, ethnicity, back in 99, 2000, about 51% of the kids, white kids had a job. But even back then, only about 28% of black kids had jobs. For Asian kids, it was about 30. Hispanic kids were much higher, they're about 44%. But you take that, 15 years later, and you see for white kids, it went from half to a third. For black kids, it went from 28% down to a fifth. For Asian kids, 29% down to less than a fifth. For Hispanic kids, 44 to 28%. So all the groups have seen this reduction, but the basic race ethnic structure has sort of stayed in place where white kids do a little bit better. And underneath that, what you'll see is a very close relationship to family income and the chance a kid has a job. And that as family income rises, the probability the kid has a job goes up until you get to the very highest income groups. Okay? And part of that, why that is because as the connections to the labor market expand a lot as that family income goes up. And so the connections, the brokering that goes on to get kids jobs is much better as the income level rises until you get to the top where people live in communities where, like Norfolk, where there are no jobs, so kids work a lot less.
Okay. Amy, can you give us a quick introduction to the Opportunity Youth Initiatives at Cohen Institute at Tulane? And what does it do and who does it serve?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. So the mission of the Cowen Institute, which was founded in the wake of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, is to advance public education and youth success in New Orleans and beyond. And when the Institute first started, we were really focused on K-12 initiatives and public policy related to our large-scale school reform in New Orleans. And as our work went on, we really saw the issue of youth disconnection to be germane to our education reform initiative as we dug deeper into the data in New Orleans and found that over 2/3 of the Opportunity Youth population in our city actually has a high school diploma or equivalency. We really, recognize that, like the national trends, more in our community needed to be done to expand pathways to post-secondary into careers. And so we founded our Reconnecting Opportunity Youth Initiatives about 5 years ago. And we do so to reconnect young New Orleanians, ages 16 to 24, to education and to career pathways. We do this in a demand-driven way. We work very closely with our economic development entities. We have a sector-based strategy to really think about the high-growth, high-demand industries in our city, but also very much recognize that this is really a pathway and that jobs along the pathway are really critical to being able to enter into a career where retention and development and continued advancement are a reality. And so we have really two signature initiatives at the Cowen Institute. One is our Earn and Learn Career Pathways program, which is an apprenticeship program that we started 2 years ago at Tulane, which is the largest private employer in the city of New Orleans, and I'll talk more about that in subsequent questions. But we focus on serving opportunity youth in that program. And then our other initiative, which we partner with another division of the Aspen Institute on quite a bit, is called our Employee Initiative. That's an acronym that stands for Employment and Mobility Pathways Linked for Opportunity Youth. And that's a cross-sector collaborative in the city of New Orleans that the Cowen Institute serves as the backbone for. We have over 35 organizations that participate, all in the spirit of addressing barriers and reconnecting young people to education and career pathways. And so we have representation from the employment sector, from the city, from nonprofit providers and policy organizations, foundations, and a whole host of organizations. So I'll stop there.
Just one quick follow-up. Are you seeing any of the trends that Paul mentioned or any others?
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely in terms of a decline of opportunities for young people to work, and some of that being kind of led by adults filling some of those jobs that traditionally young people had filled, particularly in New Orleans in the hospitality industry. And I can get into this more, but our part of our program really, or a major impetus behind our programs is this idea of fostering opportunities for young people to work, not only because of some of these trends, but also because we really think that there's something valuable about having a youth development lens to on-the-job training as well.
Okay. Keisha.
Yes.
So you're the director of youth policy at CLASP, which stands for the Center for Law and Social Policy. You do a lot of research on policies that affect youth employment and programs that improve youth opportunities. From your research, what are you seeing regarding trends in youth unemployment?
Yep. So we'll echo a little bit of what Dr. Harrington already talked about in terms of the decline, in particular as we think about young people of color, in terms of their attachment to the labor market and in terms of the value of work. And we start our work in terms of research and really talking to young people, in particular talking to young men of color who are have some of the lowest attachment to the labor market. And what we found was that lack of having a reference and lack of having those social networks, that social capital that Paul Harrington mentioned, really impedes on their ability to enter into the labor market. And so from our work, we're a public policy organization, and so while we're kind of dealing with the shifts in who's attached to these low-wage jobs or entry-level jobs, and while we're dealing with the shifts of private sector employers stepping up, which we have seen as a trend that they have been stepping up, there's a role for subsidized employment strategies. There's a role for investments at the federal, state, and local level. Most importantly, what we've seen since there has been a divestment of federal support, employment, and training for young people in particular, is that communities are stepping up, and communities are stepping up in a couple of ways. We see lots of summer youth employment experiences, and we know those are limited, and that is not enough, but it is a start in terms of helping young people to get those kinds of early work skills. I've heard from lots of other people, power skills, which is dependability, self-control, different cognitive decision-making that we all learn on the job. And I already mentioned that private sector is stepping up, in particular in the opportunity youth space, and moving some of their work from corporate social responsibility, working with young people, to actually into their business side and the bottom line, and changing some of their hiring practices. I'll end, because I know we'll get into this, some other questions, is that we have a number of strategies that we see are important and are effective in making sure young people get on a path and stay on a path into a career ladder. So I know we'll talk about those in the future.
So Tammy, speaking of the private sector, tell us a little bit about your company, Machine Specialties, Inc. Just location, the industry, what the company makes, how many people work there, and also what trends you've seen over the years from an employer perspective.
Okay. So Machine Specialties is located in Greensboro, North Carolina. We're considered a small company. We have 150 employees. We are an advanced manufacturer. We make anything that's hard to make out of metal. So we'll make parts for the helicopter, medical industry. We have surgical instruments, hip and knee replacement parts. We make the full-up landing gears for the F-16s and the B-1B bombers. We actually have parts on the space station and the Mars rover. So that's a little bit about our company. And what we're seeing is in trends of recruiting younger applicants is that they're not going into the jobs that we offer. Many of our employers in our county are suffering from the same. We are the largest advanced manufacturer in our county of North Carolina, Guilford County, and they're just not going into the skilled positions that we have for them. They're very highly paid, they're very highly skilled, and they're very highly in demand. But that trend, I think all of us have moved children to think that the path to success is the 4-year degree. And a lot of really key jobs are being left out and not looked at for success for the students.
What are you looking for in an entry-level worker?
So an entry-level person, our apprenticeship program is recruiting students. And so we're going into the high schools for juniors and seniors that maybe show some interest in mechanical ability, like to work with their hands. We're targeting the CTE courses that are offered. And we look at attendance, some of those things that are factoring into our decision. Most of the jobs that we require, that we're trying to fill from an employer standpoint, require good math skills. So we look at the math 1, 2, and 3 classes and see how well they did that in that. And even if they didn't do so well in English or history, we might overlook that as long as they've got some math skills.
Okay, thank you. So this is a great segue to our next section about how to help young workers access jobs and build early work experience. So Amy, I'm going to start with you. Tell us a little bit more about your Earn and Learn program, just how it's structured, what are the partners, or who are your partners rather, and what are their roles?
Absolutely. So our Earn and Learn program at Tulane is a year-long program for young people in the Opportunity Youth age range. And it's a full-time program, so it's 40 hours a week. It's structured such that young people are in a paid apprenticeship in one of 2 high-growth, high-demand sectors regionally. Those are IT and also what we call in our region skilled crafts. So that includes advanced manufacturing, but also many of the petrochemical jobs that are really in demand in our region. And young people are working in departments at Tulane, again, the largest private employer in our community. And so for 15 hours a week, they are overseen by a supervisor in one of those departments whom we work very closely with. They are kind of meeting milestones progressively throughout the year that we have set up in advance in order to really, after the year, leave that apprenticeship poised and ready for the next job or a set of next types of jobs along their chosen career pathway. And then for the remainder of their 40-hour week with us, we are doing one-on-one coaching, which is mandatory. We require that our participants attend social emotional learning and soft skills classes with us. We also require a post-secondary element. We have partnerships with our local community college and also Bard College out of New York has a network of early colleges throughout the country, one of which is in New Orleans, and they've expanded their programs to serve Opportunity Youth, and so we partner with them to do critical thinking, reading, and writing courses throughout our year. And then also young people are in what we call personalized learning time. So that's really group settings, and that can vary from small group counseling to honing math skills to a range of other things.
Do you want to just quickly share a success or challenge, that you've had to overcome, and whether or not you've had to fine-tune things a bit to improve the program, maybe in a way that could be instructive for our audience?
Sure. We've had to fine-tune the program every day, every week. Okay. I think that's what being responsive and doing this work and learning from it is all about. I think that success looks like a number of things. The primary 2 entities or stakeholder groups that we serve are, of course, the young people that we work with, but then also our employer partners. And so we really pay attention to our employer partners' satisfaction, their struggles, and we have had to innovate quite a bit around that in terms of really helping two-lane supervisors develop high-quality professional development systems and programs just for themselves, which they have really said have improved their systems overall, kind of their HR overall. That the work that we do to coach supervisors in how to communicate across difference, how to deliver feedback effectively, how to hold people accountable, has not just benefited our apprentices, but also employees in their entire departments. So that's something that we have really had to be responsive to, is those needs, but I think has also been a great success. Success also looks like our retention numbers and obviously what people are doing in terms of matriculation after the program. And so, our goal for retention is 80%. In our first year, we exceeded that. This year, we're just shy of that, but we're really proud of that. In our first year, in terms of matriculation, as of 6 months after the program, we had over 60% of our graduates enrolled and persisting through their pathways. We would like it to be much higher than that, but we feel for our first year, a tremendous amount of excitement about that, but a real desire to continue to build alumni supports and post-hire supports.
And what's the age range of the apprentices?
So we generally define opportunity youth in the age range in line with the Aspen Institute, 16 to 24.
Okay.
However, for this program, it's 18 to 24 because of Tulane's regulations.
Okay. Tammy, please tell us about the apprenticeship program at your company. When and why did you get involved in that approach, and how is it structured?
Okay, so it's called Guilford Apprenticeship Partners, and it's employers that come together and have united to kind of gain some buying power. We are going into the schools. We look at our schools as our pool of applicants and prospective new job holders for us. So we've decided that we can get further if we partner together. So there's now 10 employers in our group. And it's structured where we recruit juniors and seniors. They're given free college tuition, which includes the books, tools, and any fees that they have. We pay for that. It's a 3.5-year program. They're also paid for on-the-job training. It's 6,400 hours of on-the-job training that they're paid right from the beginning, and 1,600 hours of college education. So at the end of the 3.5 years, they have a 2-year degree. They have a journeyman certificate that's recognized in all 50 states in that skill or trade that they're in. They have 0 college debt, and they're guaranteed a job.
Okay. Positive outcomes for your company, or challenges you've experienced that have required you to kind of tweak the program?
So really, when we heard about this, we modeled the program after Apprenticeship 2000, which is in our state, and it's been operating for 18 years. And of course, as an employer, I was looking for the benefit of this. I have a challenge of hiring these skilled employees, and this could be, the thinking outside the box, creative way of getting them into our system. And when I went back and I told our president, because I was sold hook, line, and sinker that this was the way we needed to go, even though we had hired very little of high school students in the past. The question was asked by our model: do you make them sign an agreement that they stay with you afterwards? And the answer was no. So I thought that I might not be able to sell this to our president because he won't get a return on his investment. We're spending, it equates to about $120,000 scholarship opportunity. If you look at the wages that they're going to receive, the benefits that they receive, company benefits, just like any other employee would, and the college tuition over the 3.5-year program. And his response was, we need to do it for ourselves, but even if one of these students leaves us, we've brought that skill into our community, and they're staying in our community. And maybe if my neighbor company down the road does the same thing, then maybe in turn I'll get one of his. So, so not only has it been for our own personal capacity growth, but it's been a great thing for the community, and then it's also been a great thing for the students. I recall the first day of class at our community college, and I wanted to get in there before everyone got started and talk to the teacher, kind of like a little mama bird. And I go in 40 minutes early, and there's already some students sitting at the table with their hands crossed, and I'm like, what's up, guys? You're really early. You excited? And one of them just shook his head and said, I never thought I'd have the opportunity to go to college. And the other one said, I never saw myself here either. So the opportunity for the student, they're getting their college paid for, they have money coming into their family, into their community right away, and it's good money. It's above the minimum wage, is tremendous.
Thank you. So Paul, in addition to the apprenticeship earn and learn model, what other successful or promising approaches, do you see out there to helping young people?
Yeah, I think the piece that's missing here is high schools. High schools in the U.S. have mostly become one-trick ponies. They just have a sort of a college-bound system. I just completed a follow-up of about 10,000 kids that graduated out of the Philadelphia public schools. I tracked them over 7 years after they graduated from high school. And Philadelphia schools are strictly college prep. And basically 1 out of 5 of those kids will actually end up getting a degree or certificate. And certificate, I'm talking about beauticians. They don't have a high criteria. So it means 80% of the time we miss. And the economic return to getting no degree or certificate is zero. You get nothing. So, we've kind of got a bad high school strategy out there, I think, in many ways. And one of the simplest things I think high schools can do is build relationships with local employers. We've heard, this panel talk, that's a lot of what they're looking for. You listen to LaShawn, how did he get his job? And the answer is somebody stepped in and brokered him in. Mm-hmm. Somebody certified him. And so so every employer is trying to minimize risk. And the way you minimize risk is you get a third party to say, that's a good kid. They'll show up, they'll keep the nose clean, they'll be okay for you. And because what employers at these entry-level jobs are looking for are not strong proficiencies, looking for strong behaviors and social skills, ability, you got a little bit of that. But the ability to kind of interact and be persuasive and those sorts of things. And so that's really, I think, in high schools, I think have sort of missed the boat in that. And, I'm interested in, but maybe to what extent you're dealing, both of you are dealing with the career tech side of things, because that seems like a very promising area to me. And I think I was trying to figure out where your cousin went to high school. Did she go to the career tech school down there? In the regional school, or did she go to Brockton High?
No, my cousin went to Youth Build in Boston.
Oh, Youth Build, okay.
Keisha, similar question. What models or approaches have you seen work well, to help today's youth?
Yeah. So just really building on what LaShawn started about, talking about, is that many of our young people, especially our young people of color who have over-attachment to the justice system for a number of different reasons, pushed in, over-policing and so forth. And that's one of the things we look at, is really being able to have someone who steps in and broker. And one of the things that we've seen in terms of communities stepping up is not just a workforce system being integral into brokering the relationships, but also this idea of this core model, and would like to see more. Most of us know about Youth Build, but there are a number of cities, including Philadelphia, including Hartford, are thinking about how do you use national service, civic engagement as a tool to, one, get young people back into loop and do those early work skills, because their employers may not be there, they may not be ready for the kind of private sector employment that we're talking about here today, but nevertheless, they need to be able to have that early work experience to gain those skills. And so we're seeing a lot of models on the core side, but the other piece I'm mentioning in the schools is how do you make sure that, for example, young people who are attached to school already, young people who are younger and early teens, have the opportunity to have those kind of early work skills, high schools, in throughout the year. And so a number of communities have been doing employment competencies, working with employers, but also using high school credit. That is a central part of what high schools should be doing. And so we see it's really creating a system for young people who are already attached, who are but marginally attached to school and opportunity. But really, if we really want to get at who's the future workforce of our country, we have to really be focused on young men and women of color. And we have to make sure that when they have those obstacles, like LaShawn mentioned in his own experience, that we broker those deals and provide access. And we hopefully have private employers who can do that, who change their hiring practices. But if they don't, then we need to have coalitions and things like the Aspen work that you're doing to be able to do that for the young people.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to move on to our next section on thoughts about creating a quality job experience. We've all heard the phrase quality over quantity. And thinking about jobs, many people stop at unemployment, the unemployment rate, which is basically the binary measure of whether a person has a job or not. But we're learning more and more about quality jobs and how much they matter. And we're going to explore that a little bit now. I'm going to start with you, Paul. What are your thoughts on what makes for a good job for a young person? What defines a quality work experience versus a basic one?
I think every kid needs a basic work experience. I think that there's a set of building blocks that kids need to develop. So I don't score a kid working at McDonald's. I think quite the contrary, that's a great place for young people to start. And the question is how do you build a mobility pathway for that kid? And that probably does mean mixing work and school and mixing some other kind of educational activity. Maybe not schooling, maybe an apprenticeship program. There's lots of different ways you can pick up a particular field of knowledge, maybe through upward mobility in that company. But the payoffs to work experience, even the lowest level of work experience, is much greater than idleness. Idleness is the great sin for young kids. If you don't have early work experience, it really hampers your abilities not only to succeed in the labor market, and we also find that it has very adverse effects on post-secondary outcomes as well. So getting a kid a job, both while they're in school and in summer jobs, and especially if you can do it in the private sector, has pretty high economic return. So I worry less about quality jobs, having had some really bad jobs myself.
Okay. When you look at and think about the programs designed to connect young people to jobs across the country, how well do you think they're doing?
I think that the youth programs actually are pretty good because I think most of them have that brokering function. Because what firms are just risk averse. Okay, so they'll hire an old guy versus a young guy, not because they have figured out a good personnel system. They're just using kind of stereotypes, heuristic rules to kind of figure out this guy's less risk than the younger guy. So having a third party, voucher somebody, broker somebody, and build a relationship, and that relationship be built on a long-term connection. That this is not the only kid I'm going to send you. I'm going to keep coming back to you. And if you have a problem with that kid, I'm going to step in. And if you can do that, you get great success. And I think a lot of youth programs have actually figured that out. Second thing that they're really good at, and I think this is one of the things you're doing in your program in what town are you from?
Greensboro.
Greensboro. That one of the things you do is one of the great, most effective thing employment training programs do is they actually act as good screening devices. You put someone through a 12-week machine trade or welding program. The kid shows up every day, keeps their nose clean, working 8 hours a day. They seem to learn. It's a terrific screening device for an employer to figure out, wow, I can bring this kid into my shop. They're not going to chop their fingers off, and they're going to show up every day. This is a good kid for me to bet on, and maybe has a little mechanical ability. So I think we've actually figured some of the issues out. The question and the question is how do we organize? And right now, the only groups I see organizing are really mayors. The mayors seem to be the primary organization supporting youth employment, but not much else.
Okay, Keisha, what do you think are some key principles important for any approach in helping young people gain quality experience?
Yeah, so I'm in agreement of that any job in the beginning to gain work experience is going to give our young people a leg up, and having progressive work experience. One of the things, again, mayors are stepping up, but resources are limited, and so in a place, let's just say New York City, for example, where they have a large-scale summer youth employment program, it's a lottery system, and so there's no guarantee that the young person will be able to get a progressive experience. And so youth programs are doing a good job, but then there's just not enough of those opportunities for for the demand that is out there and the need that is out there. So that's one thing. The second thing is meeting young people where they are and understanding, especially when we're talking about low income young people are coming from high poverty neighborhoods, that just work is not enough. And so wrapping around youth development principles around civic engagement. And one of the things we're really looking at is understanding the just sheer toxic stress and environment young people are navigating and and despite of that are thriving and surviving. And so to stay on track, to do some of the great things that you are doing, showing up, and as you were saying, keeping your nose clean, requires for that community-based organization or that other entity to be able to provide those social emotional supports that are really needed. And mental health is something that has surfaced as a high priority of the communities that we work with, who are very engaged in education and training, but aren't able to keep the young people on track for a number of things. And then the third thing I'll mention is not being beholden to funding streams that want to see results in an annual basis. And so really having a long-term strategy, a long outlook, and sometimes that's difficult with our public funding streams. And so having a private sector there or a charge to the philanthropic sector is how do you push the envelope? Because when we looked at data of many of the communities we work with, there's no silver bullet. There were progressive experiences over time. And for an opportunity youth, someone who wasn't attached to school or work and who didn't have a credential, there was probably about 18 months to 2 years to a full unsubsidized employment placement. And so really being able to be there for the long haul and meet young people where they are.
Amy, how does your program focus on providing good jobs for youth?
Yep, so to reiterate a couple of the points that the other panelists have made, part of what our program does is we really try to take this, again, pathway approach. Many of the young people who are very successful in our program have had another job before. So, whether it's, again, in hospitality or construction or a number of other fields, they may have had a couple of different jobs, but still find themselves really underattached to the labor market. So we're really creating this space in the pathway to bridge to careers and really think about that advancement process and thinking about the retention along the pathway in terms of being at Tulane for a year in a job that's much higher than minimum wage, that involves this scaffolded kind of process of learning outcomes and benchmarks that our participants are building upon. And so we, hold our participants accountable. We also hold our employer partners accountable to providing those experiences. We think that, absolutely in any job, there is an element of downtime and what you do with that downtime, particularly in the trades. A lot of the supervisors that we work with, they themselves have gone through apprenticeship programs and really testify that some of their most, informative experiences were when there wasn't work to be doing. They learned that you picked up the broom and you contributed in that way. And so certainly there's an element of downtime, but we really hold our supervisors accountable to creating project work and really creating progressive learning experiences so that we're ensuring that growth.
Great. And Tammy, your supervisor, what is there anything in particular that you think that you sort of train them to do to create a quality experience?
So that was another benefit that I did not expect. There's been like a revitalization to our supervisors and our more senior craftsmen that have the opportunity to work with the apprentices and then doing that mentoring. We really never expected, and all the employers are seeing that they get a chance to transfer that knowledge, those skills and those trades to these really eager students that that come in every day and they just have this energy that just transposes the whole environment. But we have had some questions with our trainers. How do I treat the student apprentice versus that I'm training versus how I would treat a new incoming employee? Are we holding their hands more? Are they subjected to the same, our harsh reality that we would any other trainee? So what we've got a lot of support in our state, and I've called on other companies that have been doing it a lot longer than us. And one of the suggestions is a train the trainer course for these mentors. So that's what we're doing in our business.
Great. So we are going to talk briefly about additional actions that employers and practitioners can take to expand access to youth for jobs or early work experience. Tammy, you've been instrumental in designing and implementing your Apprenticeship Partners program. What are your employer partners telling you that they find most valuable?
Many of our employers haven't been connected to the schools in the past. We're all busy making our products and selling or making our businesses profitable, and hadn't really looked at the schools as a resource for future jobs. So that connection has been vital. I had no idea that the CTE classes had metal cutting courses, which about 100% of my job, or 80% of my jobs are CNC machinists, and that there are students that are being sent to these Skills USA and ranking in the nation, and I never would have been connected to those students. So that connection has been vital, that we're finding them, and then also the businesses have been able to give back. There was a student that needed some specific tools to complete a certification in high school, so the businesses are donating these tools and trying to bring in money into these programs because it's a win-win for both.
Okay. And Amy, what else do you think practitioners and employers could or should be doing to expand that access?
Sure. I would definitely reiterate the partnership aspect with both schools and then also CBOs for the brokerage, for the post-hire supports as well. I would say that when we think about employer engagement, we really think about, in some ways, it's a similar approach that we use to cultivating donors. So we really think about what are the low-stakes ways that we can really invest them in what we're doing. So, first we think about bringing them into our program to, serve as a mentor for a day, do kind of a networking or mock interview day. Really see our participants in action. Those are usually the days that are most transformative to our participants. Exposure is just, I don't think we can talk enough about kind of the value of exposure. And then it also, I think, hooks employers to really see, wow, they're doing something interesting here. These young people are learning and could be real assets to our company, and really creates that relationship from there. So I think that's just so important. I also think just, where possible, being flexible around young people's need to progressively develop and, get an education and other kinds of training. So thinking about being able to accommodate those schedules. We've already talked about really employers examining their own hiring practices and policies around drug testing, around criminal records. And then we've also talked about thinking about not only hiring people, but really having a focus on retention and advancement as well.
Okay, thank you. We don't want to forget about the role for government and policy. So very quickly, Keisha, what are some existing policies or policy changes and updates that you think can help improve the quality of youth employment?
Oh, that's a lot.
I know.
I'll be quick so we can get to audience questions. One of the things that I think is really important, I think that Paul started our talk about this, is when we had kind of full employment kind of situation. And so we've seen a divestment of funding at the federal level. And so one of the ways we can really commit is to fully fund our existing programs. We're part of an effort about reconnecting 1 million opportunity youth. And so that provides a roadmap for that with Civic Enterprises Youth Build USA, Jobs for Future Forum for Youth Investment. Another thing I think is really important, again, we heard it from LaShawn's story, but this is a story of many of our young people, is how do we think about justice reform, juvenile justice, criminal justice reform, in a way that makes employment and work at the center of creating opportunities. And so that involves thinking about ban-the-box, but other beyond ban-the-box strategies. Employer incentives. I mean, I'm so thrilled to be here, and this is just an employer, partnership that came together without any government incentives. But we know that that's not the case for many other folks. So, whether it's the work opportunity tax credit for disconnected youth or other types of employer incentives that we could really think about. I'll stop there because I could go on and on and on. But we reference career and technical education, thinking about career academies, as well as. We have an opportunity to think about higher education reauthorization and Pell restoration, as well as thinking about the role of work study and think with young people in early work experience if they're in post-secondary.
Paul, same question. What are some key policy or policy changes that you think can improve equality?
I think teen labor markets are local.
Okay.
And so what that means is so a couple of years ago, we interviewed a couple hundred employers up in Massachusetts and down in Philadelphia. And we found actually a lot of the employers were actually quite willing to work with the high school, but they couldn't find anyone at the high schools willing to work with them. That there was a tremendous disconnect there outside of the career tech system. Career tech system is a different deal, but it's a pretty small part of the secondary system. And so to me, trying to figure out how I recognize the role, how we get policy to recognize the role of early work experience and provide some kind of brokering function for kids to get them jobs while they're in high school, and mostly unsubsidized jobs. I think that if we, the unemployment rate is now under 5%, the chances of things getting better for kids, I think, is up a lot. So it seems to me that trying to support job developers and other kind of people who certify teens and young adults for jobs, I think would make a huge difference. I've certainly spent my career at 2 universities that kids pay a lot of money to, who are cooperative education institutions, for exactly that kind of brokering function.
Melanie, can I just add something that he said about it being on a community level? So our community foundation houses the Triad Workforce Solutions Collaborative, which is a national fund workforce site, and they're the ones that kind of introduced the employers in our state to other employers, and they were kind of like the glue. And they knew who to go to the schools. They knew who the director of the CTE program was. They knew who, so employers don't have those connections. They're not in the system. So the community has a huge opportunity of just kind of brokering and being the glue for these advancements in youth.
Okay, we are going to transition now. Audience, we will be taking your questions in a bit. And yeah, okay. Thank you. For those of you watching live stream, you can tweet your questions to #TalkGoodJobs. That's #TalkGoodJobs. Or you can text your questions to 202-802-6447. That's 202-802-6447.
Everyone can hear me?
Right here.
Okay, all right. So LaShawn, thanks for joining us. Just want to have you tell us a little bit more about Opportunity Youth United and how you all are working to involve young people directly in advocating and promoting for better work for young people.
Absolutely. So Opportunity Youth United is a grassroots movement led by young people from local communities. It started off sort of as a coalition of 16 national nonprofits that serve Opportunity Youth, including Youth Build, Public Allies, the Core Network, Gateway to College, Year Up, and a number of others, who, once the data was revealed, like I said, when we dug down to the data and it was revealed that there was 6 million Opportunity Youth in America, youth will realize we only serve 10,000 a year. We can't do this alone, so we need to come together. And we need to have young people at the center of it. So these young people have created a set of policy recommendations to reconnect 1 million young people a year. We're building this grassroots movement. We're creating community action teams. Where we're organizing local organizations in communities, building a spirit of civic engagement in these communities, and addressing the conditions of poverty. Because when you talk about quality education, employment, violence in the community, civic engagement is sort of core to that. So we're trying to build and empower our young people to take that on.
Okay, great. Well, we're going to move to questions from the audience. There will be someone walking around with a microphone.
They're behind.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Emma Euman with the Forum for Community Solutions here at Aspen, and thrilled to be supporting this panel, and thank you so much. This is actually a follow-up to what LaShawn just said, and I was hoping it's a leading question, but LaShawn and Amy, you could talk about the importance of engaging youth themselves in developing the solutions to this challenge, and also LaShawn, if you could speak to the work that you and Opportunity Youth United are doing with the 100,000 Opportunities Employer Coalition. Thanks.
Absolutely. Should I start? So when it comes to this topic, the young people are the experts, right? They're the ones that are directly impacted by these issues, and they could tell you these issues inside and out. So with the 100K, we've done just that. We've had these courageous leaders and these corporations come together and say, hey, we want to pledge to offer these young people jobs. And they were also transparent about, how do we do this, right? So we, Opportunity Youth United, has worked to put young people in front of them. We've had roundtable discussions, we have panels where these CEOs and presidents, not just their staff, the CEO and presidents of these major corporations are meeting with these young people, getting an understanding of what their experience is like, and the impact of unemployment is for them. And again, it puts a face to the story, because at that level, they don't really interact with our young people as much as possible, so it's easy for them to empathize. So we've definitely enjoyed that experience.
Great. So inspired by the great work of LaShawn and Jamil Alexander and so many other incredible youth leaders, also Ryan Dalton in my own community in New Orleans, we launched just this past June New Orleans version of a community action team, so a community-based body of young people to really carry out this work at a local level. Employee's mission specifically is worded that we're addressing youth disconnection with young people. So youth are part of our collaborative of 50 people total. They attend all of our meetings. They're on our different working groups. And then one of the 5 pillars of the Employee Collaborative is youth voice and youth engagement and cultivating that explicitly. So we've developed within our community action team, which we call our youth action team in New Orleans, have developed a leadership program with this inaugural group of 9 founding members who are representing a whole host of different organizations around the city. So they've participated in various programs around the city and are, at this point, really focused on just making young people aware of the different opportunities, exactly to your point, like how do you navigate where the right program for me or which programs are even out there. So that's one of their major charges. And then they're also really critical to the design of our 100,000 Opportunities launch event, which will take place in March, and really are doing so from the perspective, again, of helping young people navigate the employment supports, the post-secondary supports, and other things like that.
I would just have to echo, our apprentices are the best marketing material that we could have. If we can get an apprentice in front of other students to talk about their own personal experiences and how they got in the program and what you can do now if you're in ninth grade so you can be ready to be in a junior, they are just fabulous. And they really have taken to it. I see in the next 2 or 3 years, I'm not even going to all the high schools anymore, but the apprentice is doing it on their own. They've also sat on panels and discussions with me, and they have a different perspective that they bring, and it's very refreshing, and it's really, they sell it better than anybody can.
Could I just add one more thing about this, specifically about why civic engagement is important? Because we talked about what it looks like, but it's the only way these young people are going to be taken seriously. Because a lot of times while their issues are ignored, because these representatives don't feel the pressure coming from these young people, right? So the youth, civic engagement among youth is low, and then when you talk about youth from local communities, it's even lower. So it's easy to sort of ignore them, and they fall by the wayside, and we're seeing the implications. But the only way for them to be taken seriously, people need to know that these youth are going to come out, they're going to speak, they're informed, and they're educated, and they're going to hold you accountable. I think that's the big thing, is teaching these young people that if you want to see change, it has to come from the community, and this one representative, you can't just pass the torch and say, figure out all our problems. You just need to be there, hold that, help inform and educate that person, also hold them accountable moving forward, especially for the important elections coming up in 2017 and 2018. We're not trying to insert ourselves into the conversation. We want to be a part of that conversation.
Great. I'm going to move to a question from someone tweeted this question, and then I will move to you. So the question is, how can nonprofits and work specialists nudge high schools to work closer with local employers? This is from William Nix. And how can we overcome legal barriers?
It's a simple answer. I mean, the high schools, the elected officials in the high schools have to sort of agree to do this. And it needs to be made a priority. High schools are reluctant to do this because so much of the way they're judged now is on basic skill tests that it's hard for them to kind of divert their resources out of that. So, I'm going to get this wrong, but this is a biblical quote: "As you judge, so shall you be judged." And we're probably not judging by probably not judging high schools maybe in the best way that we could.
Hi, Francisco Alvarez with the Roosevelt Institute, but my comments are my own. I'm approaching this conversation more looking at young workers leaving post-secondary education, whether it's technical school or college, going to the job force. There are two competing narratives out there. On the one hand, there's the skills gap narrative. You have people, especially in the Silicon Valley crowd, who say, well, our problem with our labor force is we just don't have enough coders and programmers. We need colleges to teach more young people to do that. And on the other hand, there's the argument that the jobs are just not there. That the manufacturing, all these jobs, the high quality, high paying jobs have left America. I'm not very partial towards that second narrative, because what we're really seeing is that in the United States, yes, we're seeing low skilled or less sophisticated manufacturing jobs be exported, but we're seeing high value, higher skilled manufacturing jobs coming into the US, including value chains from Mexico coming into the US. But on the skills gap side, I think that's a misreading of history. I don't think that there ever was a time where the American labor force was completely suited to meet the needs of the economy at any one time. And logically, I'm also saying that I think a lot of employers are less willing to train people coming out of post-secondary education, are really counting on colleges and technical schools to train people, to equip them with the skills that they need to work for them. So essentially, they're shifting that training cost to the schools. So how do you respond to either of those narratives? What do you think about that skills gap? What do you think about the need to actually put more onus on the employers themselves to train these young people who, by all other measures, are qualified for these jobs? They just need someone to help them get those jobs specific to those roles. Thank you.
Who wants to take that?
Well, I'll start. Yeah, I'll just start. I think it was already echoed here, but to answer your question, it's local. It has to be driven locally. And so many of the community, we work with about 20 or so communities around the country, and how they find out what their industries are. Example, in Miami-Dade County, they have 7 key industries, but it was all by their labor market information. And again, thinking about their workforce development boards as a key partner of all of this. And also, in some of those places, they found that it was a skills gap because they had a large number of young adults who, in particular communities, were without post-secondary, and they were out without even a high school credential. But again, it's understanding that data. And in other places, it was low-wage work, and that leads to a different type of policy intervention that we didn't talk about, which is about job quality and which is about progressive, career change, whether within that industry or across industries. And so their approach has been some of what we've already heard: employer partnerships, school partnerships, led by the mayor and the county commissioners in terms of pushing people to come together. So I don't think it's either or. I think it depends on what the local data say. I don't know if you have any more to add to that, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say part of it depends on the business cycle. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I went to this ridiculous meeting, and they had these people in the room talking about the skills gap and middle skill shortages, and the ratio of unemployed to vacant jobs in the United States was 7 to 1. So there are no shortages. There's just a job deficit. And now, as we've kind of moved towards full employment, the unemployment rate's down towards 4.9%. In the nation, what you'll see is there'll be a geography to that. So if you go up to Massachusetts, the unemployment rate will be 3.5 to a point. Maybe it's a little bit more local. And a lot of that is actually, if you get to the greater Boston area, it's probably a little bit lower. You go to Philadelphia, the unemployment rate's still over 6, and still, a lot of slack out there. So what it means is that you do get spot labor market shortages. The problem for the education and training system and for young people that are making decisions is that when you make the decision and when the labor demand will be there, is a temporal matter. So when you're in the machine trades, it takes 3, 4, 5 years to become a machinist, or a tool and die maker is 7 or 8 years. And the problem is that if that's an industry where labor demand is in a long-term decline, but short-term cycle bumps it up, you may be missing your bet, okay? And and you gotta remember, that's what every person out there is. They're an investor making a bet, and the better informed they are about that, the better off they're gonna be. And that's why you've seen in the last 4 or 5 years, we've had some bad bets, and we've had a lot of what I call malemployed college grads. We still have that problem now.
So I'm going to take another question from our online audience, and then I'll move to you all. How do schools and training programs ensure that the jobs they are preparing kids for are valued in the labor market? So this kind of puts the onus on schools. How do they convince you that?
So I think the employer is the consumer. We're the ones that are going to be doing the hiring, and so they do need to work together. To your point, I think I've read in psychology that a kindergartner or first grader rules out in their mind what they can and they can't do in kindergarten and first grade versus I'm not good in math, so I can't do this job, or I'm a girl, and so that's a boy's job. And so I think if the employers in the community that will have the jobs when they get ready to graduate go in at that age and explore with the students what the jobs are that they're going to be available when they graduate. And then in 8th grade, they go and they visit all those communities have the job sectors, whether ours is advanced manufacturing and healthcare. And you get to go and you get to see these jobs in action where maybe you weren't exposed to them before. And then by 9th and 10th grade, maybe you get to do a job shadow or a week-long internship. And then when you're a junior or a senior, okay, I need a 4-year degree to go to the job that I really want to do because I really want this. I've explored. I've had opportunities to see that. Or I'm going to do an apprenticeship, and I know this is the kind of apprenticeship that I want to follow. So I think if we educate our students younger, and the employers are taking an active role, and the schools are working with us to do that, then it's a win.
I just wanted to add to that. I think that I echo those points, and in addition, I think that the best case scenario is, especially if you're approaching this locally or regionally, is that your employers are really informing your training programs with you. And so, again, they're bought in from the start. They really see what you're doing in some ways as free training for that industry. And something that you said, Tammy earlier really resonated with our own experience down in New Orleans, in this idea that our employer partners at Tulane and within the community have really taken an approach to kind of wanting to see their industry live on and really think about not just training for their own program, but what's really valued in this industry and sector in general. And so we've been really, we couldn't do the work that we've done without informing this program from a demand perspective, really from the very beginning.
But when if you are trying to pull in a new employer, let's say, an employer that's not that familiar with your program, just can one of you answer? How do you convince them? I mean, it's sort of a sales pitch, right? I mean, do you give them a sheet of facts and figures about the success of your program? Do you let them come walk through your facility to see young people at work? I think that might be part of what this person was asking.
All of the above. So, yep.
Okay.
So we, and that's sort of, this relates to what I was trying to articulate probably poorly earlier, but again, we really take this approach just like we would in cultivating a relationship with the donor. And so it's really, first, it's obviously kind of our pitch. Ideally, that pitch would be brokered by one of their competitors or someone who can really vouch for us. One of our Tulane supervisor partners. So, someone in their network within the industry to vouch for what we're doing. And then we meet with them, but then we really bring them to the program. Just like you said, the young people that we work with, are the face of the program and the beacons of success of the program. I mean, they are, and so are our Tulane employer partners. Like, they can really speak to the challenges and the successes in a way that's much more credible than I can.
Yes. I want to speak to what schools can do, and also to this gentleman back there's response to how the pushback that there's not enough jobs there. So I think in these conversations, what OIU has done, we've created a section in our recommendations called Upward Mobility to have the conversation be about how can we fill the job, but also add in how can we create more jobs in the community, prepare these young people to not fill a job, but to create more jobs in the community, because we don't want to just train out these young people or respond to demand data, because that's reactive, right? We want young people, and who's to say they want to work for the next person? So I think part of the long haul is to have schools and programs teaching these young people entrepreneurial skills, right? That they already have in informal markets, but marginalizing that, so that, again, that they can create their own businesses and create jobs in the community. And then employers, they can still meet those jobs. And when they're in those entry-level jobs, employers have to be intentional about, you're in this position, although you're flipping burgers, here's what this looks like in your long-term plan. Because again, we are young people. We're not trying to build an army to fill these jobs because it's on demand, right? And then that factory shuts down, then they left back on the bottom. We want them to get the job that they need, to get the skills, the training that they need to possibly be managers of their own businesses. But again, I think we need to really uplift entrepreneurs, because this is a challenge not for just youth in America, it's for youth across the globe. It's like we don't have jobs for them, so why can't they create their own and use their passion? For instance, I'm part of a group now where we're trying to legitimize. Like, we have these community organizers. Like, how do we professionalize that and have them do a job that they're really passionate about, right? So in a sense, that's entrepreneurship in itself, taking your passion and making a good living off of it. So again, just how can we fill these jobs, but just add in how can we create job makers.
Got it. I'm Monica Herc with the Committee for Economic Development of the Conference Board, and we're working on a project with employers around competency-based hiring. And the idea of that is that employers should be looking at skills and abilities that people have, including opportunity youth, and looking beyond the resume. So to the extent that employers can assess that early on and look beyond the resume, that will be helpful to everyone. So I was just curious about the panel's reactions or thoughts, if that's part of the solution to opportunity youth.
Yeah, I just mentioned it's not a study that we did, but absolutely, Child Trends and FHI 360 actually worked with employers and programs from across the globe. Again, this is a global issue as well, and some of those core early work skills, early competency skills, power skills were what they looked at, and those were the things that help young people to persist and to continue on a job more so than anything that was in their background. So I think that will go a long way in terms of changing human resources and hiring practices. And just one other point you mentioned, meeting with CEOs, and what we've heard from our communities that we work with is that is a great thing to do, because setting the tone at the top is important, but at the hiring manager level, how do we make sure they have those kind of tools? I know Rockefeller Foundation was doing work around knack, like what do you have a knack for, and that is actually bring out the innate abilities that young people already have, and predicting what they will likely be successful. So I think that will go a long way for our field.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say one more thing. I just want to get a plug in here for the Wall Street Journal. My colleagues on the economics team do great work. You should check out our website if you haven't already. We have a blog, it's called Real Time Economics, and we write about a lot of these issues. So I really encourage you to read up on our website about some of them.
Great. Well, I just want to ask everybody to give our panel a big round of applause. Thank you all so much. I will second the plug for the Wall Street Journal, and also ask you all to come back and join us again for more in our Working in America series. We'll be continuing again next year in 2017. So thank you all so much for coming back.